Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. So, well, the exhibition on the floor below by Sayuri Ichida, our artist, I hope that most of you have seen it by now, but if you haven't, you'll have the opportunity to after this talk. It closes on Friday, so we're nearly at the end of it, but it's been a very successful show, and we had a lot of people here this week, especially after it was featured in the Financial Times weekend edition. Well, I will actually say very little about Sayuri because she's going to tell you all about herself and her work. But she is very active internationally at the moment. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Fiona Rogers, who is going to be talking with Ichida this evening. So Fiona is the inaugural Parasol Foundation Curator of Women in Photography at the V&A. Previously, she worked for Magnum Photos, where she was Chief Operations Officer, and she set up an organization called Firecracker, which champions female photographers, and published a book called Firecrackers, Female Photographers Now in 2017. So I hope Sayuri is a firecracker, but I'll leave you to make your own minds up about that. So over to you.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm excited to share a bit about myself and discuss my work and practice with Fiona later on. I attended Rika Noguchi's artist talk in this very room, the previous artist who exhibited here before me. As I listened to her, I was both amazed and excited to realize that I would be the next artist to show in this space. It brought back memories of when I was a 19-year-old photography student, nearly 20 years ago, visiting her exhibition in Tokyo. She was already a renowned photographer back then, and it's such an honor to be on the same stage today. A special thank you to Jason, Nanaka, and Nana for this invaluable opportunity, and to Fiona for being here with me tonight. Since I only have 20 minutes for my slides, I'll jump straight into the presentation. The title of my exhibition is Transient, and I'll explain its meaning at the end. This is my first solo exhibition in the UK. I see some familiar faces here, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sayuri Ichida, and I'm currently based in Margate. I was born in Kokura, Fukuoka Prefecture, which was once Japan's largest industrial area, and grew up in a small coastal town in Niigata, an ordinary countryside surrounded by rice fields. My dad has always been a facility worker, and my mom was a housewife. My sister and I were raised in a typical working-class family. When I was preparing for this presentation, I tried to recall my first encounter with photography and remember that my parents gave me a stereoscope similar to this one when I was about 3 to 5 years old. I still have vivid memories of beautiful sunny landscapes and cityscapes from Western countries seen through the positive slides. I started taking pictures when I was 15. At that time, I loved collecting postcards with beautiful landscape photos, and I soon began borrowing my dad's camera. This is the very first photo book I bought for myself at 16, using money I earned from my part-time job at KFC. Shortly after starting high school, I joined the photography club. However, I was very unhappy with my early attempts and results. To improve my skills, I decided to study photography at Tokyo Visual Arts. All of my teachers were men, most of whom were influenced by Japan's legendary street photographers. They encouraged us to go out and photograph homeless people, believing it would be a challenging subject for young photography students. These are the photographs I took during that time. At first, I was intimidated to approach them, but surprisingly, they opened up quickly, and I really enjoyed listening to their life stories, even though I felt like the subject didn't quite fit my style. In my second year, I got really into fashion photography and wanted to learn more about lighting. So after graduating, I started working as a studio assistant at Ino Studio in Tokyo. I was especially drawn to the Western fashion world, so I decided to leave Japan to chase my dream of becoming a fashion photographer. First, I moved to the UK to study English, then later moved to New York, where I got the job as a photo retoucher at a fashion photographer's studio. However, while working there, I realized that I wasn't really a good fit for the industry. As an introvert, I struggled with the role of leading a crew, and I just didn't enjoy it. I stopped taking pictures for 2 years after that. It felt like I had lost my sense of direction. But gradually, I found my way back and started shooting again, this time with a film camera and completely different subjects. This is one of my earliest works, titled Deja Vu. I photographed the houses in upstate New York that matched my idea of American homes. They reminded me of my childhood dollhouse. This work was selected for the Japan Photography Award 2016, which was my first recognition. In this series, I collaborated with a professional Japanese ballet dancer in New York, and the title was taken from her first name. Initially, she asked me to photograph her for her portfolio, but I wasn't interested in creating traditional dance photos, especially after leaving fashion photography. Instead, I approached her as a sculptural object. Together, we aimed to depict the struggles we both faced as female Asian immigrants, with her body forming peculiar poses. Through this series, I developed an interest in exploring body shapes. I created this series, Absentee, during the COVID lockdown. It was such a difficult and isolating time. The constant stream of negative news and the rising death toll brought back feelings of emptiness that I had buried deep inside after losing my mother to lung cancer. She was only 47. It felt like a powerful reminder of how fragile we are, that we are all temporary beings. At that time, it felt like my inner self was absent, disconnected from the confusing reality. The feeling led me to title this series Absentee. I aimed to document my emotional state during that challenging period and stay creative amid such uncertainty. The lockdown also led me to experiment with self-portraiture. I'd never considered using my own body as a subject before, but at that time, I was the only one available to photograph. I also felt uncomfortable photographing models in the nude. Before COVID, I had the opportunity to participate in a photobook making masterclass at Yumi Goto's studio in Tokyo, which inspired me to turn this series into a book. To build the sequence, I created a diptych portfolio, which is showing here, and tried to find the right image pairs. The images are printed on thin Japanese kozo paper, and I love the paper's sheerness as an intimate and almost poetic quality to the prints. I looked for connections between the two images, sometimes discovering visual resemblances or nearly identical pairs. Artificial objects represent anxiety and fear, while the soft curves of organic forms evoke calmness. In 2021, I self-published Absentee in a limited edition of 50, designed by my partner, book artist Tomasz Lachny. This coincided with my MA degree show at the University of Westminster, where I met Fiona. The cover was screen printed by me, and the book was printed using risograph with silver ink by Pagemasters, one of only 2 risograph printers in the UK who can print with silver ink. We also bound all the copies by hand. We chose black paper with silver ink because at the beginning of the project, many of the images were taken at night, as I could only go out after dark and wanted to reflect the solitude of those nighttime moments in the book. This self-published edition led to an opportunity to collaborate with Ibasho Gallery and GM Editions, who co-published Absentee in 2022 as a limited edition of 500. We slightly increased the size, and the book opens from right to left, like traditional Japanese books. Tomasz and I were inspired by the renowned photo book, Chizu, the map by Kikuji Kawada, and incorporated gatefolds. However, instead of the single horizontal image seen in Chizu, we placed 4 images in each spread. We also created a special edition with a slipcase designed with a cut that aligns with the line in the cover image. Our idea was to approach the book in a sculptural way. In my exhibitions, I try to create rhythm by displaying framed works with no space in between, using 2 different sizes to mimic musical notes. I chose walnut frames to echo the look of shoji, traditional Japanese sliding doors. And I don't use glass because I want the audience to experience the texture of kozo paper fibers as closely as possible. The other series I'm exhibiting here is titled Ctrl Shift J, named after the keyboard shortcut I use to switch between English and Japanese. For me, this simple action reflects my cultural background and the experience of navigating between 2 languages and identities. For this series, I worked with a wide range of subjects, including archival photos from my family album, landscapes from my travels, architectural elements, and self-portraits, and more. As a child, I experienced several relocations due to family circumstances. Later, I moved to Tokyo and then abroad, and I've now been an immigrant for many years. I've always carried a sense of being an outsider. When I was transferred to an elementary school in Niigata from Fukuoka, my strong Kyushu dialect made me the subject of teasing. Here, I navigate life in my second language, and when I return to Japan, I'm often treated as an expat. This feeling of being an outsider follows me everywhere, even in my home country. Over time, I've come to accept it as a part of my identity and journey. In this series, I try to express this sensation by using geometric lines and forms in each image, enhancing the feeling of not fitting in. I've always been drawn to the beauty of geometry, and I believe this fascination stems from my childhood memories of industrial architecture in Fukuoka. The works are hand-printed photopolymer photogravures, a non-toxic alternative to traditional photogravure. I love the pencil drawing-like quality of this technique, which evokes a sense of timelessness, and it felt fitting for this project, as it brings together images from different times and contexts. The double mount board echoes the geometric lines in the image through a cut, creating subtle shadows that add a three-dimensional quality to the piece. For this particular installation, I extended the lines across the wall, further emphasizing the theme. Before moving on to the last slides, I'd like to say a little about the exhibition title. The curator Nanaka-san and I came up with the word transient, as both series explore the theme of temporality. We also decided to use a phonetic letter to mimic the playfulness of the title, Ctrl Shift J. Before I finish, I'd like to share a bit about what I'm currently working on. One of my latest works is a collaboration with my sister. Growing up, we had very different personalities, which made it hard for us to connect. I tried to be a big sister the wrong way, being too strict, which made her distant from me. However, after losing our mother, we went through challenging times together and slowly grew closer. We spent our childhood in a small town in Niigata, where my father worked at the nuclear power plant. As kids, we played on the beach and watched the power station glow at night. But since the Fukushima accident, that same beach now evokes a blend of nostalgia and anxiety. By photographing her in our hometown, we are revisiting our sisterhood and trying to strengthen the bond we once failed to have. Lastly, I was honored to receive the Jarwood PhotoWorks Awards 5 last year, and I'm currently creating a new body of work for a touring exhibition next year. For this project, I decided to explore Japan's depopulation issue. While this issue has only recently gained attention outside of Japan, it's been a pressing reality for me, having grown up in a small town. 2 out of 3 elementary schools in my hometown have already closed, and my junior high school is also scheduled to shut down in the coming years. Nearly 450 schools close in Japan every year. I plan to visit several closed school buildings in Niigata to create photo collages, and I intend to print the images on chalkboards, which are strongly associated with schools. The UK is expected to begin experiencing a natural population decline this year. So my goal is to raise awareness of this issue among UK audiences, encouraging them to consider the possibility of a future similar to Japan's. Thank you all for your time and attention.
Hello. Oh, it works. Hello, everyone. I can see some friendly faces in the audience, which is very nice. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Sayuri. That was, I mean, a potted overview of your practice, but I mean, it's such beautiful work. I mean, this is why you filled this room so quickly. But I wanted to start by referencing when we met, 2021,
Yes.
and that we met during your Westminster degree show. And I remember coming, and I was with Emma Bokit, who recently featured your work in the FT. And I remember thinking that it was at once so Japanese and so unlike anything I'd seen before, you know, this like abstraction and this, you know, the flipping of the images and this sort of reference to twins and the doppelganger. It was sort of at once very familiar to me, and then, you know, this sort of long history of Japan and Japanese photography and obsessing with photo books and things. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about Japan and Japanese history of photography, and how much you're conscious of that, and how much you play with that, or perhaps it's something that you try to reject. I mean, we talked on Friday about this idea about you know, diasporic identity and how, you know, that you so I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about, you know, how you feel your work intersects with Japanese photography history.
Yeah, first of all, I feel very privileged to be from country with such a long history of photography, and with a great number of great photographers. But at the same time, as a young photography artist, I was a bit struggling with this Japanese label, because this Japanese label is so prominent in this field. So at the beginning of my career, I tried to suppress the Japaneseness in my work, because I was living abroad and I wanted to blend into Western culture more. But at some point, I realized that it naturally comes out no matter what. So I decided to adapt it, and I started even experimenting with my cultural background, for example, by using Japanese paper.
Yeah, I think that's very evident. This, you know, you guys working together on the book design, you know, this very process driven approach you have to your work. I mean, clearly you like to get your hands into things, and I guess you like to make things. You know, the process of making the book together and hand stitching, and, you know, there's obviously a lot of sort of Japanese references in that with the way you make your work. I wonder, you touched on some of the techniques that you use in your photography, but I wonder also if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on, you know, darkroom techniques, or you know, what you like to print with, how you're photographing, you know, within the, whether it's the absentee with, you know, within the sort of studio practice.
Maybe it's I think that having tactility in my prints is very important and an essential part of my work. I think it partially comes from my background of being commercial photographer, or having worked in the commercial photography industry for many years. I was looking at digital photography on the screen every day, and so that I wanted to go to opposite direction, and I love hands-on process. I love the tactility if the work has like it's almost like, how can I say, like I think tactility affects how audience experience the work. I've looked at so many photographic works, mainly to get ideas or inspiration for my own projects, and I realized that at some point I don't get as excited as before, especially when I look at photography with digital prints. It feels too flat and too dimensional to me. So I tried to add tactility feeling to my work for that reason, because I want the audience to experience it.
I also wonder if there's something, some PTSD in your fashion career that you're like working through, because fashion photographers spend forever looking on a screen at the tiniest little detail of, this thing that's going to be a massive billboard. And there's something about returning to the scale of, of bookmaking and of printing that is almost like a rejection of the way that maybe you had to work when you were doing commercial work. But I wanted to talk about Absentee a little bit more, because it's where we met, and I think probably a lot of people will have discovered your work through that book. And I mean, I just absolutely love that video of you. That should be an art piece. But I wondered, this idea, I mean, you talked a little bit about, and Josh and I gave each other like a slightly weird look when you were talking about, the legacy of Japanese street photography, and your tutors who, were encouraging you to kind of go out into the street and meet vulnerable people. And, I guess it was very much of its time. It doesn't suit you, and I suspect it doesn't suit a lot of, working contemporary, particularly probably female artists now. I think that, the ethics around that have thankfully moved on somewhat. But I also wonder if you using your own body in some way was also maybe a rejection of, the lack of control, I guess you may have felt being sort of pushed into photographing people that maybe you didn't feel very comfortable with. And we do see a lot of particularly women artists using self-portraiture as a way to to control their own image making, but to also not to exploit other people within that process. Do you think that, is there something in that? Did you feel it was easier, more comfortable for you to shoot, to photograph your own body? And maybe you can talk us a little bit about how you did that, because it really looks like someone else has taken those photographs.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a bit challenging because I didn't have prior experience of doing self-portrait.
You wouldn't know.
Yeah, if there was no COVID, I wouldn't have done it. But so it was a fun process. It was almost like discovering my inner self, and also I had a feeling deep inside me that as a woman, and I'm reaching 40, and I had this idea of maybe I should preserve my current body shape in a picture as a female photographer. I had this kind of feeling somewhere in my mind, but COVID opened this door and allowed me to explore this area. And how I did self-portrait was that all the pictures in Absentee series were shot on film camera, but the self-portrait pictures self-portrait was so difficult to do it on film camera, because I had to focus and do posing at the same time. So I had to use digital camera. I put my digital camera on a tripod and photographed myself. So I used my phone, for example, like I was holding my phone and then remotely controlled my camera, and I hit the shutter button on my mobile app, And I printed those images on like A3 photographic papers, and I re-photographed the image on film camera. That was the process.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess also this, the types of paper you're printing on and the color differences for you are also really important, because the work sort of fluctuates from being this very, very deep silver, as they are in the book, to almost like a greeny gold. I mean, when you showed the installation shot, I was reminded of how different the images look in color depending on how you're experiencing them. Sometimes they look quite black and white on a backlit screen, but then when you have the book, they're very silver. Is that something? Are you thinking a lot about the ways in which different paper stock? Are you very experimental? Will you go through lots of different papers before you land on something that you like? And maybe you do that together, perhaps.
I made the portfolio first, and I was determined to use that particular causal paper because it felt perfect for this series. But we wanted the book to have a different feeling, and I want the reader to have a different experience in the book. And during my presentation, I briefly mentioned that so there were a lot of night shots at the beginning of the project. So I wanted to add this night feeling into the book, and for that reason, we decided to go for black and silver. But I really like how it turned out, how different the exhibition presentation and the book, so that the audience can enjoy two different versions.
Yeah. And a lot of the photographs in the book are you, but you wouldn't necessarily, like your face is sometimes covered, or you've clearly tried to sort of abstract your own body.
Yeah.
I mean, is that you sort of responding to this sort of feeling of melancholia, linked to the loss of your mother? Was there a particular reason why you wanted to be hidden?
Anonymity plays an important role in my work, because I think it's important to leave a space between me and the audience. It's because as a viewer myself, I'm not a big fan of photographic works that shows the model's face very strongly, because I don't know this person. I don't know the personality of this person. So I feel a bit awkward. So for me, it's important to have this space. For that reason, I try not to show my face. And then it's not only this series, but in other series, most of the images, I don't show the model's face for that reason.
Yeah, I noticed with Mayu as well that you had a similar. Is it? So it's almost so that the viewer or the audience can almost interpret their own experience with the work. It's very interesting. And the newer work, the work that you're showing here, and the work that you're now doing with your sister, there's also a kind of tactility. I mean, Ctrl J has this very what's the word? Intervention aspect to it, with the cuts and can you tell us a bit more about the process of making those? Is that something that you do, or perhaps you guys do it together, or how does the piece kind of become this sort of unique thing?
So first of all, with this series, I use archival photos almost for the first time, and because all the images came from different times. For example, I used my grandpa's passport picture, and some images are my self-portraits and building pictures I photographed during my trip. I want them to blend into one work. So for that reason, I went for photo etching technique, because I believe that this printing technique gives feeling of timelessness to the image. And I wanted to, so the reason why I decided to play with mount board with the cut was that I wanted to add a feeling of 3-dimension. And also I wanted to add a playfulness of geometric lines and forms in the image.
Yeah, it's very graphic in a lot of ways, from a sort of design perspective. I mean, clearly you have an eye for the design as much as you have an eye for composition and shapes photographically. Is that something that you think you'll continue with, this idea of I mean, it's collaborative in a lot of ways?
So we are actually working on a book for this project, Ctrl Shift J, and then we want to try to adapt the same effect into the book. And and like I mentioned in during my presentation, I have this big fascination towards geometric lines and forms. It comes from my old childhood memory of seeing factory buildings, and I often get inspiration from artworks from constructivism era. So I think that reflects into this.
Yeah, the lines are very constructive. And the work that you're making with your sister, I mean, in a way, Absentee was about your mother, even if she didn't feature in the photographs. And now this project with your sister, I mean, how has it been? I mean, you're sort of going from working with your own body to working with archival and found images, and now you're working with a person who is part of your family. I imagine difficult to kind of direct or control in any way. How are you approaching that? Is it a directed project? Are you sort of treating her in a way like almost like a character, or is it more of a sort of collaborative experimentation?
It's more like, so first of all, I think we are doing this to make time to spend time together. We had difficult sisterhood when we were a child, so we both knew that we need this kind of time. And then my sister is a musician, so we wanted to do some creative collaboration. So it naturally started because she needed some pictures for her music work, and then it continued, and it became a project. It's through this project I'm like discovering new sister in a way in her, because we've spent so much time separate. So yeah, I think and how I treat her is it's similar approach to Mayu. It's a bit more like, I'm not a documentary photographer or portrait photographer, so it's more like I treat her in a way like a sculpture way.
And where is your sister's still in Japan?
Yeah. In Niigata.
So it's a good
hometown
opportunity for you to go back,
Yeah.
and this idea of the collaboration, I imagine, heals some unspoken
Yeah.
traumas, perhaps,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe goes some way to
Yeah.
repairing lost years.
Mm.
I think there's been many fantastic photography projects, books, etc., that come out of families finally kind of coming together and collaborating.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing it.
Mm.